Have you ever felt like your opinions aren't entirely yours? You may have noticed that we often reproduce ideas that we receive from society without really thinking about them. From an early age, we are trained to accept ready-made answers at school, follow trends on social media, and not question common sense. And when someone dares to think differently, they are quickly labeled as rebellious, strange, or even dangerous. But why is thinking freely and independently seen as something threatening? Because strong critical thinking is capable of breaking the comfortable illusion that keeps us docile and controllable. Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher who bothered many precisely because of his lucidity, said that true freedom only happens when you clearly perceive the reality around you without the masks that society imposes. In this video, you will discover why they don't want you to think this way, and how Schopenhauer can help you build a strong, lucid, and truly free mind. Before we begin, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any transformative reflections like this one. The world against critical thinking. Schopenhauer understood something that few dare to admit to this day. The world was not made for those who think for themselves. From childhood, we are surrounded by structures that shape the way we see life. School, for example, rarely teaches us how to think. It teaches us how to memorize, repeat, and obey. Students who question the content or propose another way of seeing a problem are often ignored or reprimanded. We learn early on that it is safer to agree. Over time, this behavior becomes a habit. As adults, we are exposed to a constant barrage of information, opinions, and trends. Social media, news, advertisements, and even casual conversations shape what we consider beautiful, right, and acceptable. And all of this works because it appeals to something deep within us, the desire for acceptance. Thinking differently means running the risk of being rejected, and that's scary. Schopenhauer drew attention to this fragility of the human mind, how willing we are to compromise on the truth just to maintain a comfortable illusion. Society rewards those who fit in, who repeat without question, who go with the flow. But those who try to break free from this often face resistance, isolation, or ridicule. The most curious thing is that this resistance is not always explicit. There is no villain with a sign saying, "Don't think." Instead, the system sustains itself in a subtle way, by distracting us. Distraction is the modern weapon against critical thinking. If you are constantly entertained by quick content with pre-chewed opinions, when will you have the time or the desire to truly reflect? Constant distraction makes you stupid. It fragments your attention, weakens your introspection, and rusts your deep thinking. And the more distracted you are, the easier it is to be manipulated. The unthinking. Masses become perfect for consuming, obeying, repeating. This is how the system perpetuates itself. Schopenhauer was a thinker who lived in near isolation precisely because he did not accept this collective theater. He saw society's behavior as something artificial, driven more by appearance than truth. His philosophy was a denunciation that much of what we consider normal is just convention, blind repetition, fear of thinking for oneself. This chapter is necessary because it unmasks the real enemy. It is not a person, it is not a group. It is a model of life that distances us from lucidity and autonomy, a model that wants us to be busy, superficial, and conformist. And what makes this more dangerous is that it does not impose itself with violence, but with comfort. The comfort of not having to think, of following the majority, of doing what everyone else does. But as Schopenhauer himself said, the truth has never settled among the majority. In other words, if you are living like everyone else, maybe it is time to be suspicious. This distrust is the first step to awakening. When you start to question what felt right, when you feel like something doesn't fit, it can be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. It's at this point that you start to come out of the cave, as in Plato's metaphor. And this is where Schopenhauer's philosophy begins to become a powerful tool. Now that we've identified the system that tries to shape your thoughts, it's time to learn more about who Schopenhauer really was and why he might be the ideal guide on this journey to free your mind. Who was Schopenhauer and why is he so relevant today? Arthur Schopenhauer was a 19th century German philosopher who spent much of his life ignored by the great academic centers. While others sought fame and prestige, he chose the path of intellectual independence. He lived in seclusion, writing with disconcerting frankness about suffering, the illusion of happiness, and the instinctive nature of human beings. His direct and uncompromising style was disturbing, and for this reason he was silenced for decades. But time has corrected this injustice. Today, Schopenhauer is recognized as one of the most lucid and courageous thinkers who ever lived. And not because he created a closed system of ideas, but precisely because he descended to the rawest level of human reality and returned with truths that few had the courage to face. His main work, The World as Will and Representation, presents the thesis that everything we experience is a mental representation, guided by a blind and incessant inner force, the will. This will constantly moves us, impels us to desire, conquer, consume, but it never completely satisfies us. The result is a cycle of frustration and suffering. While many philosophers spoke of reason, progress, and social virtues, Schopenhauer got straight to the point. Life is marked by pain, boredom, and constant struggle. It may seem pessimistic at first glance, but in fact he offered something that few others do: lucidity. And with lucidity comes the possibility of inner freedom. This brutal honesty becomes even more relevant in today's world, where everything revolves around forced happiness and artificial positivity. Social media sells an image of a perfect life, full of achievements and instant pleasures, but behind the screens, many are exhausted, confused, and lost. The modern discourse is that you can do anything, you just have to want it. But Schopenhauer asks, what if your own will is the root of your suffering? That's exactly why he fits so well into the current moment. In an age where everyone wants attention, he valued silence. Where everyone wants to be right, he sought truth. And where everyone is chasing stimulation, he preached contemplation. Schopenhauer didn't promise comfort, he offered awareness. His philosophy is not for those who seek easy formulas or motivational phrases. It is for those who want to understand themselves in depth, even if it hurts. And it is precisely this type of thinking that builds a strong mind, not one that runs away from pain, but one that faces reality with courage. Now that we understand who Schopenhauer was and why his vision is so necessary today, let's dive into his method. In the next chapter, we'll start with the first big step: seeing reality without masks. Part 1. Seeing reality without masks. Seeing the world as it is, not as we wish it were, is the first and perhaps most difficult step toward building a strong mind. Schopenhauer said that most people live in denial, protected by social illusions, comforting beliefs, and constant distractions. But he also argued that true freedom only exists when we take off these masks and face reality head-on, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. For most of society, this sounds like a negative thing. After all, who wants to face the pain, the emptiness, the imperfection of life? But for Schopenhauer, illusion hurts more in the long run. It keeps us going around in circles, seeking pleasure where there is no fulfillment, trying to escape pain without understanding its root, escaping silence with constant noise. And here's the key: when you see reality clearly, you become less vulnerable. Because when you understand how the world really works, your expectations change. You stop expecting perfection from others, from life, from yourself. That's not giving up. That's clarity. And clarity is a rare kind of strength. One of the great dangers of the modern mentality is the promise that everything can and should work out all the time. This obsession with success, positivity, and unshakable self-esteem creates a perverse side effect: emotional fragility. When something goes wrong, and it inevitably will, the person who lives trapped in this illusion becomes completely unstructured. They are not prepared to deal with reality because they have spent their lives trying to avoid it. Schopenhauer proposes the opposite. He invites us to accept that suffering is an essential part of existence, not as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of life. And in doing so, he frees us from an enormous burden of frustration. If you understand that pain exists, that loss happens, that imperfection is the rule, then you become more stable. You don't break with the world, you learn to dance with it. Of course, this requires a break with everything we've been told is normal. It requires looking at what's around us and realizing that many things that seem to make sense don't. It requires realizing that many people don't live, they just repeat. That many ideals we follow are fragile constructions, sold as truths, and that's where fear comes in. Seeing reality without masks is scary at first. You realize that you're more alone than you imagined, that the world isn't waiting for you with rewards just because you've made an effort, that there's no automatic justice or guaranteed path. But at the same time, this realization gives you something valuable back: autonomy. Now you're awake. Now you can choose, and not just follow. This kind of clarity is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. You stop being a pawn. You stop being manipulated by ready-made speeches, empty promises, idealized images. You start to see the intentions behind the words, the structures behind the appearances, and that changes everything. It changes the way you relate to people, how you consume content, how you react to adversity. You stop looking for magic formulas and start seeking real knowledge. You stop running away from pain and start learning from it. You exchange the comfort of lies for the solidity of truth. Schopenhauer did not want to create a philosophy that pleases. He wanted to create a philosophy that awakens. And the first lesson is this: you need to look at reality without filters, without makeup, without excuses, because only then will your mind stop being fragile and start being free. In the next chapter, we'll delve even deeper into this journey. Now that your eyes are open, it's time to look within and confront the most powerful force at work within you: your will. Part 2. Mastering the will. If seeing reality as it is already requires courage, mastering the will requires even more. Schopenhauer believed that the true root of human suffering is not outside, it is within. There is a force that moves us all the time, a blind, instinctive impulse that makes us desire without stopping. He called this the will. Will, according to him, is the engine of existence. We want to eat, we want to be loved, we want to win, we want to conquer. And when we succeed, we already want something else. There is no end. This incessant cycle is what imprisons us, exhausts us, and makes us dependent. Life, for Schopenhauer, is a pendulum between the pain of lack and the boredom of satiety. Think about how this manifests itself today. Endless scrolling through social media, the anxiety for approval, the search for likes, for stimulation, for entertainment. We are constantly searching for something and rarely satisfied with what we have. This unbridled desire turns us into puppets of our own desires. Mastering your will does not mean eliminating desires, but rather not being dominated by them. It means recognizing this internal drive and, instead of giving into it, learning to observe, pause, and choose consciously. It is the difference between eating because you are hungry and eating out of anxiety, between acting out of clarity and reacting on impulse. Schopenhauer saw self-discipline as an essential path to this mastery. He advocated a simpler life, with less stimulation, more contemplation and control. Not as a moralism or a religious imposition, but as a strategy for mental survival. A mind that does not learn to tame its will becomes its slave. And this slavery manifests itself in subtle ways. The difficulty in saying no, the compulsion for distractions, the fear of silence, the addiction to easy dopamine. When we are driven only by what we want at the moment, we lose autonomy. We become fragile, manipulable, vulnerable to any offer of immediate pleasure. Mastering the will, on the other hand, is an act of resistance. It is what allows us to build a strong mind, one that acts with purpose rather than reacting on instinct. A mind that chooses the difficult when it knows it leads to the best. A mind that tolerates the discomfort of discipline to avoid the suffering of weakness. This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy connects with very current practices: dopamine fasting, meditation, minimalism. They are all modern attempts to reduce inner noise, to quiet the will, to regain control. And all of these practices have one thing in common: they put you back at the center of your own life. It's not about eliminating all desire. Desire is human, but it's about stopping being held hostage by what you want. Because when you master your desire, you begin to choose with more clarity, more presence, more autonomy. You gain freedom, not to do everything, but to not have to do everything all the time. Schopenhauer said that a wise man is one who has learned to silence his desires, at least for a while. and find peace in what he already is. It is not about resignation, but about power. The power to not be dragged along by what the world offers at every moment. And here's a practical thought. The next time you feel that urge to open your phone for no reason, to buy something you don't need, to say something just to assert yourself, stop, observe, feel the impulse, and choose whether to follow it. That's the training. That's the revolution. In the next chapter, we will talk about the space where this mastery of the will is further strengthened. Solitude. Because it is in silence, far from external influences, that the truly free mind begins to form. And now, I want to hear from you. What desire do you feel dominates you the most today? And what would you do if you had total control over it? Comment below. Your experience may help others who are on the same journey. Part 3. The freedom of the solitary thinker. A strong mind is not born in noise, it is born in silence. And that is why Schopenhauer saw solitude not as a punishment, but as a blessing. In an increasingly connected and paradoxically increasingly superficial world, the ability to be alone has become a rare superpower. He said that the richer a person's mind is, the less they need the outside world to feel complete. This does not mean rejecting social interaction, but rather not depending on it to exist. The solitary thinker is one who has built an internal universe so deep that he is not afraid to be with his own thoughts. But today's society does exactly the opposite. It encourages you to be with someone all the time, connected, busy. There is a collective fear of emptiness, of silence, of the absence of stimulation. How many people can go an hour without a cell phone, without a TV, without music? Few. And why? Because they can't stand being alone. And that says a lot about the state of the modern mind. For Schopenhauer, solitude is the laboratory of lucidity. It is where you can hear your own voice without the echo of the crowd. It is where ideas are born pure, without interference. It is where you can reflect without needing to justify yourself. And more than that, it is where you can rebuild yourself. But to experience this freedom, you must first overcome the discomfort, because the onset of loneliness hurts. It hurts because you see yourself in a mirror without filters. Insecurities, mental addictions, and fears that you use to camouflage with distractions appear. But over time, this pain turns into clarity, and clarity turns into strength. The solitary thinker is not a misanthrope, nor does he hate others. He simply understands that there are times when the best company is his own thoughts. He protects himself from excess, chooses conversations better, filters what he consumes, and builds his ideas calmly without rushing to please. This attitude bothers those who live dependent on constant approval. After all, those who are comfortable in their own presence do not need to prove anything to anyone. They do not need to post every step, nor have an opinion on everything. They do not live to be seen, they live to understand. Have you ever noticed how many of the opinions you have were absorbed in groups, in conversations, in social bubbles, in environments where thinking differently was almost forbidden? Temporary isolation serves precisely this purpose, to clear the mind of these layers of social noise and allow an authentic vision to emerge. And the interesting thing is that the more time you spend with yourself, the more selective you become about what you allow into your mind. You quickly notice when a conversation is empty, when content is shallow, when an environment is draining your energy. Your sensitivity increases, and with it your power of choice. But be careful. Solitude is not isolating yourself out of anger at the world, but rather temporarily distancing yourself from it to rediscover your essence. It is a strategy, a time of silence so that your mind stops repeating what others say and starts to build what you really think. Many of history's greatest geniuses valued retreat, not as an escape, but as an immersion. Nietzsche, Pascal, Thoreau, all understood that deep thought requires withdrawal, and Schopenhauer was perhaps the most radical in this. He believed that only in solitude does man become fully himself. If you want to build a mind that resists, that reflects, that does not bow to trends or external pressures, you need to cultivate this space. A space that is only yours, where ideas can mature, where the spirit can rest, and where the truth, your truth, can emerge. In the next chapter, we'll turn all of this into action. You'll learn 3 practical steps inspired by Schopenhauer to help you strengthen your mind in your everyday life, even in the chaos of the modern world. Applying Schopenhauer today. 3 steps to strengthen your mind. By now, you've understood that Schopenhauer didn't propose a philosophy to memorize, but rather a lens to see life more clearly, and, most importantly, more freely. Now it's time to put this into practice, because it's no use just understanding these concepts. You need to live them. Below you'll see 3 simple but transformative attitudes that can help you strengthen your mind using the Schopenhauer method as a guide. 1. Be wary of popular opinion. In a world where almost everything is a contest of narratives, one of the greatest signs of mental strength is the ability to question conventional wisdom. Schopenhauer warned that public opinion is the lowest form of thought because it is built not on reflection, but on repetition. Most people believe what is most convenient, most comfortable, or most widely accepted. And here comes the first step. Always be suspicious when an idea is accepted by everyone without question. When you hear an opinion repeated en masse, whether in the media, on the internet, or even among friends, ask yourself, does this really make sense to me, or am I just accepting it because it's easier? This simple action will start to free you from manipulation. You will stop being a passive sponge and become an active filter. Over time, you will start to identify weak arguments, contradictions, and exaggerations, and this will strengthen your clarity of thought. 2. Reduce empty stimuli. The second attitude is what we can call fasting from distractions. Schopenhauer believed that the human mind becomes exhausted by excessive stimulation, especially superficial stimulation. And today we live in an environment where we are bombarded with information all the time. Short videos, notifications, endless timelines. But a strong mind is one that can digest what it consumes and not just accumulate it. When you are constantly exposed to empty content, your brain loses the ability to delve deeper. You become impatient, scattered, reactive. So, practice selective pruning. Reduce the time you spend on social media, eliminate sources of noise, and avoid impulse buying. Ask yourself before you open something, will this add value to me, or will it just distract me? If it has no value, don't open it. It's not about living like a monk, but about protecting the mental space where lucidity can grow. By reducing empty stimuli, you increase your capacity for focus, introspection, and discernment. 3. Create a ritual of silence and critical reading. Finally, Schopenhauer was a voracious reader, but he did not read for volume, he read for depth. He believed that true reading is that which provokes thought, not that which merely entertains. And more than that, he saw in intentional silence a fertile ground for inner growth. Therefore, the third practical step is set aside some time each day, even if it's just 20 minutes, to be silent and read something that expands your mind. It could be a piece of philosophy, a classic author, or a book that challenges your beliefs. The important thing is that this time is protected, constant, and uninterrupted. Silence activates reflection. Reading activates critical thinking. Together, they build a more robust mind, less susceptible to influence and much more aligned with its essence. You don't have to become a philosopher, but you can start thinking like one. And that, in today's world, is already a revolutionary act. These 3 attitudes, questioning popular opinion, cutting out distractions, and creating rituals of silence and critical reading, are simple but powerful tools. They go against the grain, and precisely for this reason, they are the beginning of strengthening your mind. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already changing. So now I ask you, like this video. This is not only a sign of support for the channel, but a sign that you value this type of content, direct, deep, and transformative. In the next and final chapter, we will close this journey with a reflection on the price and reward of thinking freely. The price of thinking freely. Thinking freely comes at a cost. It's not just an intellectual choice, it's a way of life. When you begin to see the world more clearly, you inevitably distance yourself from certain groups, certain conversations, certain illusions. This can bring loneliness, discomfort, and even rejection. But at the same time, it brings something few experience: authentic inner peace. Schopenhauer knew this. That is why he lived much of his life on the margins, but never as a victim. He was a privileged observer of humanity. He preferred the discomfort of truth to the comfort of lies. He preferred freedom of mind to acceptance by the majority, and that is the same choice you need to make now. From the moment you begin to free yourself from the opinions of others, to tame your impulses, to cultivate silence and reflection, you stop being just another one in the herd. You become someone with your own voice, with discernment, with a real presence in the world. But it's important to remember, this path has no end. A strong mind is not an end point. It's an ongoing process. Each day, you will be tested by distractions, pressures, and expectations. Each day, you will be tempted to return to the comfortable illusion. And each day, you will have the opportunity to choose again, to think or to repeat, to live or to follow the script. The world may never fully understand a free thinker, but you are not here to be understood. You are here to understand yourself, and that is the most important mission of all. If this content spoke to you, subscribe to the channel now. This is the best way to continue accessing reflections like this and strengthen this community of free minds that we are building here. Your support makes all the difference. Remember, they really don't want you to think this way. But if you've gotten this far, it's because you've already started thinking this way.